So the original goal when they started in 1959 was to excavate the fort totally so they could reconstruct it totally. And that's still a really long-term goal. But our more specific goals now are to learn more about daily life, particularly at this site, which was such an important part of the fur trade frontier. So we're interested in questions about military life, about fur trade life, and about how people came together, the French, the British, the various native nations, and how they made a community out here and how we can learn about that archaeologically. Archaeologically, it adds a whole new level of authenticity. It's a whole new stream of evidence. It's a very well documented site, but with archaeology, we're able to address things that people didn't write about, and what specific kinds of things they had. What kinds of dishes were they using? What kinds of beads? We have lists that say a gross of beads. What kind of beads? How did they organize their lives? What were the people who don't show up in those records? What were their lives about? And can we see the variation on a household level? Those kinds of questions. For any given project, we start with what building. We have maps that give us the general layout, although one of the biggest contributions was finding the barracks, which doesn't appear on any of the maps. So but generally, we have a building, we want to know where it is, so we figure out where it is on the grid, we lay out the grid, we start the excavation process. We'll find, first of all, the pieces of the building, remnants of the trenches, maybe a hearth, something like that. We find all these artifacts, we excavate the house totally, or whatever the structure is. We do the analysis, figure out what it all means, and then a building can be built based on our findings. I don't have a huge specific long-range agenda. Our agenda sort of works on a project-by-project basis. So with this particular building that we're excavating, we know that a British trader lived here. And so our overarching research goal is, how does a British trading household look different from a French trading household? But also a lot of our research ends up being dictated by the things that we find. So for example, the last two houses that we've excavated, we found rosaries that have more beads than a standard modern rosary. And so that's turned us into researching questions about French-Canadian religious practice on the frontier. Well, it's the thrill of discovery, and people are always so interested to say, oh, you mean we're the first people to see this in 250 years? And yes, and so that's fun, and it's interesting, and it's a tangible link to the past. They can look at something and say, oh, yeah, that's a fish hook. Sure, that looks like one today. And there's also the hope that you never know when that next really interesting, big, spectacular find is going to be. And people always hope that, oh, I'm going to see something outrageous. I don't have a favorite. They're like kids. You can't pick a favorite. People always ask me that. Oh, it's the best thing you ever found. But for me, it really is the pieces of the picture. And the more pieces of the puzzle that you have, the better your picture is, and the more you can really understand what's going on. And so I don't have a specific favorite. Any particular year I can say, oh, I think this was the most interesting thing. But overall, no, there's too many. Mm-hmm. Because I think it's so important to learn from the past and to learn how people answered the challenges of the past. And maybe we can, hopefully not repeat their mistakes, and also to learn maybe some things that they did that we can apply to how we live today. Our work supports the mission in terms of we're discovering more about the past. We hope through the way we do our archaeology to protect some of the resources. And then we're very much involved in the presentation of it. And teaching people the importance of the resource. In the big picture, we're teaching people the importance of archaeology, what you need to do to protect sites, why it's important to excavate in a particular way, the kinds of things that we hope to learn. And so we're trying to present that and to present the things that we're discovering. And we do that by supporting the interpretation program, so we can provide these extra details that can help flesh out the kinds of programs that we present. I hope they take away that the past is interesting, and that the past is full of people who in some ways are very different from us, but in some ways they're people too, and they are motivated by the same things that we're motivated by. They want a better life for themselves, they want a better life for their children, they're looking for happiness, as elusive as that is, they're looking for success, and then you get into, maybe defined differently then, but I hope that they can see that the past is real and that there were real people there. You can see a piece of the past, and you can, somebody else held this. 250 years ago, this belonged to another person, and they used it. And maybe they used it in a way that you can relate to using it. They like to fish, or here's their dishes. And yeah, I have dishes at home too. And we do that, especially with kids, well, here, do you recognize this? Do you recognize that? Now, here's something that you won't recognize, but this is how the equivalent today. Like this year we were finding a lot of gun flints that had been reused to start fires. And well, this is the equivalent to matches or a lighter, and then they can relate to that. Because people are interested in other people. I mean, it's just part of, I think, doing good history and getting people interested in history is tapping into people's inherent nosiness, reading about other people's lives. Why do we like a good novel? Why do we like a good movie? It's a new window into how other people live. Well, because it's a living history site, it's different than just going to a museum that's a building that has things in it, because we're trying to present a living community, and so there's things happening, there's activities happening, and so you don't just see an object. I'm all about objects. I think objects are great. You can tell a great story with an object, but you can tell a great story even better when someone is using a copy of that object, and when someone is creating something, when there's sights and there's smells and there's sounds. So people come in and you can hear the blacksmith and you can smell the smoke, and maybe if they're working in the bake oven, you can smell some bread, and you can experience the things growing in the garden. There's smells there too, and there's textures, there's things you can touch. And so that's what makes, any living history site. And I think part of what makes our site unique is because a lot of people don't realize how old the European history of northern Michigan is, much less start to understand the time depth of the Native American presence here. And so we present that story. And I talk to people, even people who live in northern Michigan, who've lived here their lives or most of their lives, and they're always astounded. Really? 300 years? Really? And yeah, so I think that's something we have that's really special, because it's something that a lot of people don't know about, and so we can just help foster an appreciation of what went on here and how important this place was, 300, 400 years ago. One of the most important ways to think about it is an entrepot, which is a really fancy way of saying that a lot of things were transferred here, a lot of people passed through here with a lot of goods and a lot of ideas, and it was a place of great exchange, and it was a place of we go back to the old idea we've used for a long time of coming together, but it's more than just coming together. It's what happens when you come together, and how these various cultures and all of this stuff that they had, how it all changed each other, and how something new was created. And that's also not very elegantly phrased, but I think that's the important thing is how much ferment was happening here. Because they're interesting and they're fun and history's cool.